Let me welcome you here. We should get started. It's so wonderful to see all of you. Really appreciate you taking the time out today. I think this is going to be well worth your time. It's going to be a lot of wonderful things. I recognize that for most of us, we didn't get any of this in college. You can go through a whole music ed degree and never be asked to do anything in jazz. And so then you get out there, and you definitely have to do something with the jazz band, and it makes it a challenge. And so there are a lot of things that you do know that help with the jazz band from your education, that you just use the same things that you do in the concert band. But there are a lot of things that are unique to the jazz band as well. I'm hoping to cover a lot of that today. A lot of this will have to do with one of the most common problems that are always out there. We adjudicate, we see these same problems, the same issues over and over again, and hope to help you find some way to address that. In 5 hours, we can only scratch the surface, really, but we will do the best that we can, and we hope to do more of these. Now, in my mind, there are 4 things that you've got to address to build a superior jazz ensemble, and that has to do, first of all, with helping the horn section with correct tone production, section playing skills, intonation, all the stuff that you already know. But all that is critical in either band. Second, you've got to be able to help the rhythm section. And the rhythm section is something that we don't get much chance to deal with in our college programs. In fact, a lot of us graduate from college and we've never even played in a group that had a rhythm section, let alone knew anything about a rhythm section. So that's one of the reasons we've chosen to focus a lot on the rhythm section this morning. We're going to take the first 2 hours on the rhythm section here, because I think that's going to really make a big difference to what you're able to do with the rhythm section after this. So we'll focus on that. The third thing you've got to be able to do is deal with style. This includes swing style, kind of our common practice period, as Baroque is our common practice period in the classical realm. Swing style is kind of our common practice. Bebop, really, the swing style is our common practice period in jazz. You've got to be able to deal with time feel, how you deal with rhythm, and how you deal with articulation, and all the things that build into swing feel. But then you've also got to be able to deal with, what if I change now to a Latin style or a rock or funk style? What about the ballad? There's other styles. It's really going to be, there's no way we're going to get to everything today, but we'll do more of this. And the fourth area that you've got to be able to deal with is your soloists. The lifeblood of the music is improvisation. And if we don't have any improvising going on, I remember quite a few years ago now, we had a band that played out here in the DeYoung at our jazz festival here, and I was adjudicating that day, at least in that hole or something, I don't remember. Anyway, they came out with a full jazz band, but they also had clarinets, flutes, French horn. They had a whole complement of horns besides the normal standard instrumentation. And then they played things that were jazz-like, but there was no improvisation involved in any of it. And my comments to him were, you've got to get to the improvisation. That's the lifeblood of the music. You know, you're doing jazz-like things, but you're not doing jazz. I watched Leonard Feather and Mark Ridley go at this one time. Leonard Feather, one of the great jazz journalists and reviewers and so on. And Leonard contended that you could have jazz with no improvisation. And Mark Ridley, who wrote the jazz history book that's used probably more than almost any other book, or at least in the past, and he said, no, you have to have improvisation. I watched him go back and forth. But really, if you want a superior ensemble and a good score, you got to have some soloists, and they've got to be improvising. And it's amazing what can be done at a high school level, but you kind of have to have some idea what to do with that. That's the area that we're not going to get to today. So maybe the next time we do this, maybe we spend a lot of the time on dealing with improvisation and soloists and stuff, and ways to do that, because there's just no way to get to everything today. We're going to get to a lot of stuff on the horn sections and a lot of stuff on the rhythm section, and I think in the process of that, a lot of things on style. We're not going to get to the soloists today. But that's a critical part of what you do, so I'm sorry, but there's no way to do it in the time that we have. So this event is sponsored by the Jazz Education Network. I don't know if you know what that is. Some of you are members and some of you probably don't know what it is. But it's the organization that grew up to take the place of IAJE, International Association for Jazz Education. IAJE bit the dust when there was some mismanagement at higher levels, and it was really a disaster because it had become such an amazing organization. And Mary Lou Papich and Lou Fisher grabbed a hold of it and said, we got to keep this something going. They didn't want to call it IAJ again. So Jazz Education Network is descriptive of what it is. And Jazz Education Network is now 10 years old and has tremendous conferences. I see 2 or 3 of you at least that were at the conference in Reno in January. This next January it's in New Orleans. And that's going to be a great one. And I'm hoping that maybe you'll feel some inspiration to become a member of Jazz Education Network before this is over. We'd love to build our Utah base. Surprisingly, for the small number of members, relatively small number of members that we have of JAN in Utah, we have had the national president, well, international president, right from Utah, Caleb Chapman. We'll see him later in this afternoon, and the Caleb's high school super band will be here to help us with some demonstrations this afternoon and so on. But I'm hoping that you will consider that you ought to be a member of that. We have recently had a Utah area leadership appointed. From the national office, I was appointed to be the president, and I asked Phil Keene if he would be the vice president, which means that he'll be the next president after 3 years. And Jen Madsen back here, I think hopefully a lot of you know Jen, but she's done a lot of important work behind the scenes, and she's the secretary, and she'll be doing the vocal clinic this afternoon. She's turned out some amazing singers. So we've got some great people to help you today. I need to also say that the event is also sponsored by the Herb Alpert Foundation. Through the IAJ, through the JAN organization, there are grants that you can get, and you could actually get some of these grants at your school. It's called Jazz to You. To You, yeah, Jazz to You. And you can make applications to get funding to help you with your festivals and stuff like that. You do have to have an JAN person.
Old habits die hard.
Yeah, you have to have a JAN person as your clinician, somebody that's a member. But other than that, I think you might consider applying for grant money. And really, a lot of your schools are willing to put some money behind having you attend. Is that true, Chris? Mm-hmm. Chris has attended these, and he's a member.
Yeah.
And by the way, Chris is the vice president over jazz in UMEA, and we have a close relationship, and we're trying to work together and help each other, and we're excited about that, and we appreciate Chris being here today a lot. And he maybe can help you with understanding what happens at the JAN level if you'd like. He's been at the national conventions, international conventions, and it's really amazing. In fact, you should know about the Generations Jazz Festival, the JENNE, Generations Jazz Festival. It was one of Caleb's brilliant ideas, really, that the organization should be having students here, and they should be doing something about inspiring young players. And so I actually did it the first year, and Jeff Coffin and I. And Jeff Coffin did the small group room, and I did the big band room. And we were the constants, and so I spent 3 total days. I was there for every band. I was the only person there for every band. But every hour I had somebody else working with me. And the band gets a whole hour, and they are able to play whatever amount of the time they want to play for that, and they get the rest of the time in the clinic. Surprising to me, some bands will show up and play 45, 50 minutes. But that makes no sense. But the fact is, I'm judging, and here's Gordon Goodwin next to me, and we're working together, and here's Wayne Bergeron, and John Fedchuk, and Bob Mincer, and on and on, one after another. Jen Madsen is actually over all the jazz vocal stuff for that, and she's the one that gets all the clinicians for the vocal stuff. So we're excited to try to bring more of this to Utah and maybe bring more Utahns to these great events because they really are amazing. Very educational. I feel like I learned tons from when I was a very young teacher, going to these every year and going to the places where I felt like I was weak. I mean, I spent a lot of my time in rhythm section clinic at those things. I spent time in trombone clinics. I remember being in this, there was a John Fedchock and the Woody Herman trombone section were doing this clinic, and there were 40 people in the room, and I think I was probably the only guy that wasn't a trombone player. And I was the one asking all the questions. But you know, it's amazing how much you can learn by going to these things, and I think your schools will support you. You ought to really consider that as well. It's a phenomenal experience. So, I think with that, yes.
And it's free, I think. The conference is free for the kids if they go after that. The Gen conference.
Yeah, I think go for the Generation Gen.
If you take them to that festival, then they can attend Gen for free. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or it's close, something like that.
And you could also apply to have your band play as a featured band, you know, and things like that. Just like the Midwest or the what have you. Farmington had a great event at the Midwest this year. Yeah. I didn't realize we were getting on top of a festival here, so I'm sorry we don't have Heath. He's running a festival up north. Let me introduce you to the rhythm section while you're going with the rhythm section clinic. On piano, we've got Steve Erickson. Steve actually graduated from here years ago, played in synthesis, but then he became the pianist in the Airmen of Note Air Force Jazz Band in Washington, D.C. for 20 years, retired, and now lives in American Fort. So great to have him in this area. Phenomenal pianist and a phenomenal teacher and writer. Andy talking to him about buying some of his charts. We're playing some of his charts with my band. I think a lot of you know Phil Keane, teaching down at Snow College, directing the jazz program down there. Bassist extraordinaire. I don't know if any of you caught him. He played for a week recently, and I think he's done it more than once on the Stephen Colbert show. He's played with everybody, and I think you know him pretty well. But I hope you saw his bass clinic down at the UMEA conference this year. Phenomenal. And I think this is a guy that doesn't need to be introduced to anybody. The most in-demand drummer in the scene here for decades now, Jay Lawrence. That's the first guy I hired.
Thank you.
And he and I are actually partners in Jazz Hang Records, a small independent recording label, and we're about to put out an album with the Jeff Hamilton Trio and Kelly Eisenhower, which we're quite excited about. And you ought to check out jazzhangrecords.com for Jay's album, Sonic Paragon. All the queued up stuff is also there. Yeah. And Ron is part of queued up along with Jay. This is Ron Saltmarsh. Ron is a phenomenal guitarist, and he is the director of our commercial music program here at BYU. He spent 11 years in Nashville, was very successful in Nashville, and has had his own recording and production business here in Utah for many years. And to have his expertise here in our commercial music program is really phenomenal. We also love having him play in Queued Up, which was our faculty jazz quintet here. So, Ron Saltmarsh. You take it from here. I think we're getting some handouts passed out here, so let those go down the row real quick, and I'm going to let Jay take it over.
We'll get the ball rolling. Before we get any farther, can we thank Ray for putting all this together? Okay. So I see friends' faces, and I also see faces that are friendly. I think before we talk about music, let's play a little bit of music. We'll just play one number, and then we'll dive in and give you hopefully something. And that's to give you time to get your hand up. One of the most called tunes at jam sessions is All the Things You Are. One, two. All right, so I recognize that there's a lot of things I could learn, and all of us could learn from you. We know that. We're just here to share what we know, and so we're diving in. Feel free to stop us, slow us down with questions, and it'll be probably helpful for more than just you. If you have questions, don't hesitate. All right, so we'll begin with drums, and we'll end up going through the entire rhythm section. But as far as drums go, on your handout, is there an extra handout? Just so I can look at what I gave you. I probably talk about the duties of a drummer first, and thank you very much. And so, has anyone ever had trouble with their student drums? Oh, yeah. I think it's probably what's missing is the bird's eye view. but they don't understand really what their job is. Maybe they think their job is to play loud and fast and impress people. Well, anyway, so if you can kind of convey to them that together with the bass player, their primary function is to define the time. Now, sometimes with strong players, and especially in the world of jazz, there's no conductor, especially when he walks off the stage, you know, where's the real conductor? It's this rhythm section, and the heartbeat really comes from the combination of bass and drums. So in jazz, most jazz styles, in swing in particular, the quarter note is king. And if you want to get your rhythm section to groove harder, make sure they understand that concept. Is the quarter note is where the pulse is. Subdivisions don't even have a chance unless the quarter note is together. And so maybe the bass player and drummer should just get together after school and for a half an hour pick one tempo and play at that tempo. F blues, just Phil and I. And one limb. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. After 5 minutes, add something like feather baseball. I hope you can't hear it. It should be very soft. You want to feel it instead of hear it. Maybe on the next 5 minutes. A lot of drummers, they're just getting their coordination together and they don't get what's happening in the conversation between snare, bass, piano, and guitar. That's where the comping comes from. They provide harmonic comping, harmonic forward motion and rhythmic forward motion, and the snare and bass, sometimes the hi-hat, provides rhythmic forward motion, comping. Do we all know that word? It comes from two words, to complement or to accompany. So comping is to complement or accompany, and basically it's giving rhythmic and harmonic forward motion to the music in progress. And so one of the first things your student drummer should start working on is getting their coordination together so that they can keep the time happening. Because in jazz, the time is derived from the cymbals. Okay, the quarter note on the ride with anticipations, the often 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, and that's kind of the glue that holds the jazz band together. Okay, all the conversation that happens during the soloist or ensemble passages is up to the drummer's discretion. There's a lot of improvisation involved, and yet they won't have a chance if their coordination isn't put together. So on the handout, I tried to give you a few pages, not too many, but a few pages from my drummer's workbook, which I'm making available on sale today. And you can look at the 3 books that are up there. I've got some business cards there if anyone's interested. This is page 73. It's a 232-page book, I think. Is that what it is? Something like that.
I think 241.
231?
241.
Oh, 241.
Yeah.
So page 73 has this way to kind of put your drummer's coordination together. And basically, this is every possible combination of 8 notes within the space of 2 beats, and then repeat it again the next 2 beats of the bar. And so if your drummers can go through it limb by limb, having the other 3 limbs fall back on the default pattern, that would be a good thing to get your student drummers to work on first. Okay, so Brother Campbell, there you are, pick a limb. You only have 4 choices.
Your nose. Let's go left foot.
Left foot, oh. Okay. All right, so the hi-hat's gonna go through the 8-note grid, and the other 3 limbs will fall back into the default pattern, which is at the top of your page, 73, okay? So your student drummers may not be anxious to do the left foot first. Probably do the left hand first, and then the bass drum, and then eventually get to the left foot. But anyway, so it's gonna sound something like this. Everything's part 1. So, the bass drum. Normally, feathering should be softer than that. This is kind of a hard bass drum to control for me. So that would be something you could pass out to your drummers. And then page 74 is all the possible combinations of triplets. Coordination, as far as putting coordination together, if you can find page 40, it says 4-limb coordination.
Yeah, you didn't put page 74 in.
Yeah. So here, anyway, look at page 40, and that will be combined with the next page. So this, whoops. Maybe this wasn't 4 copies in order. Where's my stick and go page? Cats?
It's right in front of it.
Yep. In front of me.
Oh, good, okay. Oh, you did 2 sides, very good. All right, so anyway, 40 is the foot patterns, 41 is the hand patterns, and let's just choose one at random. F in the feet, which is, by the way, these aren't things I made up, these have come right out of music. F is a check-a-day and a Cuban tumbao, right? That's what the bass player does, and 2 and 4 often. And then we'll pick number 8, F8. So there's our F, right? And 8 is singles one direction and then singles the other direction. So your drummers, they will at first resist, and then they'll feel the challenge. Once they've tasted success, they'll feel the challenge of getting their feet and hands coordinated together, and just be patient with them, because they need to be patient with themselves. And if you start them down this path, like for example, the foot pattern, letter A is the jazz foot pattern, right? Letter B is the bossa nova foot pattern, and so on and so forth. So if you just take your young drummers, are there any junior high band directors in here? Yeah, okay. And then high school, the rest of you probably, and some college? Yeah, good. All right, so by the time they've been in college, hopefully they've been taking private lessons and they put it together, but it's a good page to challenge your drummers with. And as long as it's fun and there's a little healthy sense of competition with the other students, you'll notice that they rise to the occasion and they'll put it together. Okay. So coordination is an issue because your time can be hindered by or helped by your strength or lack of coordination. So, working with a metronome. A metronome is a musician's best friend because it keeps us honest. right? And so, one of the things, I love my band director. He was my band director for the first year of junior high and the first 2 years of high school. I was lucky to have a drummer be my band director. And he was unusual, and to prove how unusual he was, in the Nevada All-State Band, the first 3 or 4 chairs were from Sparks High. That included all the high schools in Las Vegas. The first 3 or 4 chairs in every section. I mean, this guy was very successful. So here's one of the things I saw him do, and I asked him about it later on, and I got like a list of things, tips to give you at the end of my presentation, which I better hurry up. He would make friends with the principal and actually take us out of math and English and social studies, the startling, right? In order to have weekly sectionals. And our sectionals consisted of stick control, the book Stick Control, which some people refer to as the drummer's Bible. And he would have us play stick control exercises with a metronome, tape record it. This was back in the days of 1/4-inch tape, and we'd roll it back, slow it down to half speed, and we'd listen and analyze. Hey, when I got 3 left hands in a row, it sounds like the first 2 are too close together. And, you know, we just really put the musical microscope on it. And that does great things for your percussionists. They start to become aware of time and spacing and their technique and their relaxation and their evenness between their strong hand and their weak hand, that sort of thing. So, all right, let's see. So that's that. We talked about time and moving on. Style. This drummer's second job is to determine the style, often with of course, with the help of the rest of the rhythm section. And, you know, I thought I'm thinking in the last few seconds about what we might do. Let's play, we'll keep it simple, All of Me. And I will change styles maybe every 16 bars. Okay? They don't know what I'm going to do, but watch how good they are. Let's start by swinging. Actually, we'll start with the 2-fill. You guys know the difference between a 2-fill and a 4-fill? Okay? 1, 2, 1, 2. So, because I didn't either. And I changed in weird places. But you get the idea that style is kind of generated from these four cats right here. And so if your rhythm section knows that, then that's half the battle. And then they need to start learning all the ingredients of a style. That's all it takes. Every music has a recipe. And I used to tell my wife, I can write in any style. Oh yeah, well write me a country song. So I wrote a country song. Oh yeah, well write me something in Debussy. So I wrote a Debussy thing. Flavorfully. Oh yeah, can you do Michael Jackson? And Ray heard that song, did you?
We recorded it in my studio.
Yeah. So anyway, every style of music has a recipe. There's ingredients. Once you understand the formula, you can approximate it. Now we still have to respect the tradition, and I'll talk more about that later. All right, the drummer's next job is to support the dynamics. And everybody knows that one snare drum can wipe out all the strings, every woodwind player, and most of the rest of the brass. Right, so it's pretty important for them to start working on their soft touch. It's a hard thing for drummers because it's such an acoustically present instrument. Supporting the dynamics is a big deal, and when the bass and drums drop down, the whole band goes, oh, I should be playing quietly. And so, when bass and drums fill up a lot of sonic space, and so make it your rhythm section's job to play dynamics just as much as it is the horn player's job. Okay, so delineating form. What was the form of the first tune we played? All the Things You Are. Anybody?
A-B.
What is it?
ABA.
ABA prime.
ABAC.
ABAC. Or some people might say ABC A prime. Because there's 8 bars and then a harmonically and melodically different second 8 bars. But you could call it AA, but because it's a related material. But let's call it A, B, C is the bridge, and then the last restatement of the first A is a 12-bar section, so it's actually a 36-bar tune. Jazz musicians have to understand form, and when they do, that allows a bass player from Tokyo and a piano player from Argentina and a horn player from Sweden and a drummer from New Orleans to all play together. You know, is this common language, understanding the form, the chord progression, the melody, and the history of the tune. So that's a big deal. Delineating. So how does a drummer delineate form? Goes from brushes to sticks. Goes from hat to ride. Goes from one ride to another ride. You wouldn't want them to change rides in the middle of a soloist, at the same soloist, but maybe change rides for a new soloist. And so that's why a lot of jazz kits don't have that many crash cymbals. It's because they prefer, like Jeff Hamilton, the great Jeff Hamilton. He has no crash cymbals. He has 3 cymbals that he can write on. And so that's so that he can delineate form, and he crashes his rides anyway. All right, reinforcing the arranger's intent. Ray, did we get that track up? I don't know if I'll be able to hear it. It might be pretty loud. I will not be offended if you put your fingers in your ears.
You will hear it.
And this is page...
You looking for the composite hits?
Yeah.
Yeah, second to last page.
There it is. Okay. Okay, I won't be quite ready for it yet. Coming up soon. So the page is marked 66, composite hits, the second to the last page. It's something I put in the book with some play-along tracks that they can download once they've purchased the book. The drummer's job is a little tough because it's when we read charts, if you played exactly what's written on the chart, it would be bad. Sammy Nestico, when he wants this, writes this. You know, now that I've played a million Sammy Nestico charts, that's not going to be a problem. But your drummers sometimes don't know it, and I've met a band director that didn't know it. You know, he said, "No, just play what's written." But really, it's 1/3 reading, 1/3 interpretation, and 1/3 improvisation. And that's why so many young drummers have a terrible time reading charts. What do they usually do? They listen to the band for a while and then lose their music. Can anybody relate to that? All right. Maybe you ought to do a music check about every week. Make sure they still own it. Make sure they still have it, so they can pass it in at the end of the semester or whatever. By the way, the other thing this band director did that I went to high school with is he didn't plan any festival music until 2 weeks before the festival. We were sight reading every day. We were working on pitch and rhythm reading exercises and just all the fundamentals. And then he'd pull out the festival music 2 weeks beforehand, and we won every festival. Kind of a different way of approaching things, huh? Most of his students have, well, I can't say most, many of his students have become professional musicians because he just taught us to love the process, love music, and
That's how Jeff Tower handled it. He had the Hemet High School band, which was one of the tour de force bands in the country. And they would sight read from the beginning of the year until after Thanksgiving. All they did is sight read every rehearsal. Pile of charts. He would keep notes on which ones he liked. And then right after Thanksgiving, he'd go back to some of those charts that he thought would be workable, and they started rehearsing. The rehearsals were way, way faster because they did so much sight reading.
okay, so the skill that's needed to punctuate horn figures is you got to be able to go from time to a fill to a setup, play the figure with the horns, and get back to the time. So there's really all those elements, right? Time, fill, setup, punch, back to their time. If you get back too soon after the punch, it doesn't feel natural. So anyway, this page gives the drummer a chance to practice the 8 different spots in a typical 4/4 bar, one at a time. I think juice it, Ray.
You ready?
Yeah. I'll just try to demo, and I'm trying to create variety in my field.
Composite hits.
1, 2,
Matt Larson's voice.
1, 2, 3.
Could you even hear the horns? Okay. They were mixed a little too low in my opinion.
Okay, that sounded like an accordion there.
Yeah, that's right. I was not in on the mix. Yeah.
Does the book come with demo tracks as well in addition to the practice tracks?
Me playing? Mm-hmm. The answer is no, but it comes with everything else, like how to create your fills and the 3 parts of the fill. So anyway, did anyone notice the one thing that was in common on all the hits? I would stop. My setup was a solid sound on the downbeat before the punch. So if the punch was on 3, I would stop my fill with a solid sound on beat 2. That helps the horn players feel comfortable coming in. If the punch is on the end of 3, then my setup would be on beat 3. Okay? So that's what helps the horn players feel comfortable coming in, and if the drummers can practice knowing where they're at in the bar, you know, counting, keeping track of the beat, so they know. And by the way, it's a good idea to practice playing different length fills. Sometimes a 1-beat fill, half a beat fill, or a 6-beat fill. You know, and you notice I varied the length just to demonstrate that. All right, and I think that's the hardest thing for young drummers to learn is basically figuring out how to get the coordination and the counting together, the reading and the improvisation, the interpretation, putting all that together. It's going to take some time, and I recommend that you send them to a strong jazz teacher, jazz player. Phil could teach drummers because he knows all that stuff. Steve, Ron, and so it doesn't need to be just a drum teacher, but you know, then they can get into instrument-specific things. But that's that. So
I think you were generous when you said a third of it was reading. I mean, that's got to be a well-written chart if you're going to read that much.
yeah, well, okay. 20% is reading, improvisation and interpretation. Right?
Just reading the other 2/3 of math.
So we're moving on. All right, any questions about kicks, setting up horn figures? Oh, here's one thing I should point out. The launch pad, if it's on the bass drum, the kick tends to be on the snare drum, punctuated often with a cymbal. If it's the other way around, snare, then the punctuation tends to be in the bass drum. So this sonorities alternate. Chris?
Oh,
Right.
Brian.
Oh, Brian.
You actually just did what I was just going to ask you. So,
Oh, okay.
you got it. Read my mind.
I heard you thinking.
Yeah.
Hold on, are you guys related? Chris and Brian? Yeah.
Yes, we are brothers. No.
Brothers from another mother.
Looking like that?
Identical, no, I'm just kidding.
I never must be.
Okay, now, has anybody had trouble with their drummers being musical? Let me talk about it. It's not entirely their fault. As band directors, we tend to sometimes treat them differently. You guys just be quiet while I work on the horns. Or, you know, that happens a lot, right? And so, or we're doing a warm-up and the drummers are back there screwing around. Instead, I beg you to challenge them. Make them learn Italian expressions. Give them a test on all of their key signatures. How many are there?
15.
15, good. Okay, remember the 3 enharmonics? E and C flat, D flat and C sharp, F sharp and G flat. Okay, make them learn how to read. Make them learn how to read well. And then if you're playing scales, have them play the scales. If you're playing arpeggios, have them play the arpeggios. If you're sight reading, make a copy of the oboe part and the flute parts for the mouth players. Okay. Turn them into musicians. Treat them like the rest of the band, and you'll be glad, and they'll be glad.
Hey Jay,
Yeah.
question, so like if you're running scales with the band, could they be asked to do the four-limb coordination, the stick control exercises, a different one with each scale?
Yeah.
Would that be reasonable?
That would be reasonable as long as they also know their scales.
So if you're alternating them out with mallets?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could do that, like half this week, and have them go back and forth.
So not just keeping regular time?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as they know theory as well as any person in the rest of the band. Because drummers are, contrary to popular opinion, they're not the stupidest person in the band. They're just they just generally are treated differently. Okay. Steve will take care of you later. Okay, so limb balance. In jazz, let me know your opinion on this because I respect his opinion. The ride tends to be prominent. You don't want it to be loud, but this might take precedence. This probably second in the dynamic scheme of things. Snare drum maybe third, and it should be understated. All the comping should be understated until you have some reason to make a big accent. And feathered bass drum needs to be the quietest. Why? Because we need to hear the bass player's notes. And if it's playing a punctuation, like if you're doing a melody between your snare and bass, then you don't want it to be too quiet because it needs to be balanced with the snare. We good?
I agree.
100%. All right, thanks. Yeah, so I did put books, these 3 books up here and my business cards. One is a rhythm reading book, which is good for all instruments. The drummer's working there. And then there's a book that I found in my teacher stuff. I was in his will. Can you believe that? What a blessing that was. When he passed away, I played and spoke at his funeral, and then when I was at the wake, I said, yeah, we got to get back to Utah. Got a long drive ahead of us. And his daughter said, oh, by the way, my dad gave you everything. What? And I actually was in his will. I got everything. His timpani, his vibes, his drum sets, his snare, his library. Anyway, I was rifling through one of his mallet briefcases, and I found this manuscript. And lo and behold, yes, lo and behold, it was a book that he had written, and he probably had lost it, and he probably didn't know, and yeah, I don't know where that is. And so I decided as a tribute to him, I would publish the book that he wrote. It was about big band drumming. Every time it said 26 rudiments, I turned it into 40 rudiments. Other than that, I didn't change a word. And he showed where he wanted illustrations, and so I had some guy take a picture of my hand trying to illustrate what he was trying to talk about. So that's a teacher that played for, how many people can say this? They played for Michael Jackson, Frank Sinatra, and Elvis Presley. He was great. And he wrote a book about big band drumming, so that might be helpful for your students. Okay, so and you can take a business card and do what you want to do. Gear care. Okay, has anybody ever had trouble with drummers messing up their gear? Dave, yeah. So if you don't create a culture of respect, sometimes they don't respect it. And sometimes you need to lock things up and make sure at the end of every rehearsal things are back into place for everything and everything in its place. Ron Bruff was here forever and ever, and people knew they were going to die if anything happened to the gear. And so it was more of a culture of fear, which works pretty well too. Anyway, so very quickly, because I know I'm running out of time taking these guys.
You ran out of time, Jay.
What's that?
You ran out of time.
Oh, I ran out of time. Okay, so change heads when they have divots in them. Fills and solo vocabulary. You can look at my soloing exercise in your handout and make sure there's listening going on in your band programs. Maybe as they come into class, until the warm-up officially begins, maybe have a record playing. As far as using percussion, respect the traditions. Don't combine Brazil and Cuba unless there's a compelling reason. And so anyway, you can look at the rest of the stuff and email me with questions if you'd like. My business cards are at home. All right, so who wants to go next?
I'll go short.
Okay.
So I promised that we would talk about things that you usually see that are problems, and I want to be sure that we focus that way for the next hour. The things we usually see that are issues and how we deal with them. That's the biggest thrust, rather than a...
Are there issues I didn't address? Yeah.
Just one quick question. So can you talk a little bit about, because sometimes if you're going to do a setup for a horn hit,
what you might hit as the drummer might be different depending on what the horns are actually doing, like whether it's a long note that they're sustaining versus...
Okay, articulation?
Yeah.
All right, so in drums, we have several short sounds. For trombone, short notes, that works. And so I said several, there's only two. And then maybe this is a short sound, you know, a choked hi-hat and so that would be a short sound. Our long sounds include this, the cresting of a ride, hitting a cymbal with rivets, splashing your hi-hat. So depending on the figure, drummers can articulate with the rest of the band and pay attention to shorts and longs. And one of the best things to do is get your drummers to hear horn figures like horn players hear them. Get them to know the syllables. Ba-doo, 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 ba. Ba-doo, beat-up. You know, just have them sing like a horn player might sing. Any words on that, Ray? Horn player. Okay.
We went past locking into time really fast, and I think that's a big issue. I think we should spend another minute.
Yeah,
Take it away.
yeah, that was one thing I wanted to talk about as well. I really like what you said about playing duo with bass and drum, because I actually did that a lot growing up and in college and high school. And it was really beneficial. I'd just get together with drummers and play time for, you know, literally a couple hours. You know, different times, different tempos, different time signatures, just focusing on time. It didn't even matter if it was like a specific tune, it would just be just time, you know. And then sometimes we'd pick a tune and I'd play the melody, and then we'd, you know, I'd take a solo, and then he would take a solo, or he or she would take a solo, and I would play time along with them. Just various ways of trading back and forth. And then we would do the classic trading choruses, trading eights, trading fours, twos, whatever. That was really an important part of my development. So I would highly recommend that. Yeah, I can attest firsthand to the value of that. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else about time?
Yeah, actually, time specifically for bass is not just about the right hand. A lot of people think that it's, you know, obviously, you know, you got like, the right hand is what everybody sees moving. But if the left hand is not coordinated with it, it won't sound the same. So we have two hands that are coordinating to create mostly one tone, one note. And if they're not in sync, the time's not going to be as good. The great bassist Oscar Pettiford used to practice left-handed at nighttime because he didn't want to wake up his kids and his neighbors. And I think there's a lot of value in just practicing, you know, whatever it might be, scales or an actual tune, you know, to get the timing correct. It's also important to have good contact with the left hand. So you want to be pressing down the fingers. I like to think of the fingers as weights. You know, if you think of being in the gym and you set down a weight on the floor, you're not pressing it into the ground, but it's applying weight to the floor because of its weight. It's applying pressure. It's making good contact with the floor. So the left hand fingers, I think of them in that way, where they are kind of resting and creating good contact. You don't have to be, you know, doing this, but they need to be making good contact. If you hear buzzing of the string, you're not pressing enough. And it's a balance between the thumb and the fingers, so they kind of meet, they push together, press together. Again, it shouldn't be like gripping or a lot of tension, but it needs to have good contact. And then another important part of that is breathing. It sounds, you know, maybe a little unnecessary, but if the bass player is not breathing appropriately, taking deep enough breaths, if you're taking shallow breaths, that can actually cause more tension in these, especially because this is kind of an unnatural way to keep your hand. So kind of trying to breathe through the tension that you feel in the left hand and in the right as well is really important. I remember one of my first lessons with my first jazz bass teacher. I was playing something and I wasn't breathing correctly, and my shoulders were getting all tense and everything. And he came over and he just shoved my shoulders down and said, breathe. So I started breathing and everything felt so much better and worked so much better. So I think about that every time I play, literally every time I play. Remember to breathe. So it's the coordination of the right and the left hand. In terms of time, with the right hand and left, but just getting a good time feel. I had the good fortune to study with Ron Carter during my master's studies, and for that time, it was about 2 years, a big majority of my practice time was spent with quarter notes. You know, none of the in-between notes that we all hear. We hear that a lot on great recordings, and great bass players do that. But the only reason why that stuff sounds so good is because the quarter note is solid. So I spent a lot of time just playing scales, very simple exercises, focusing on consistency in the tone, consistency in the volume, eliminating any buzzing or extra noises, finger noises of any kind. Just trying to be very strict about creating pure tone. So I would practice it softly. And I would be very critical of myself. Like with what I just played, the last couple notes were much louder than the rest of it, on the G and the F. I played those two loudly. So I would try to play this scale exercise, and it's a Ron Carter exercise. 1 octave F major scale in half position. The goal was to play it 10 times perfectly without any notes being out of time, out of tune, louder or softer than the other notes, and no extraneous noises. And it was a lot more challenging than it may sound, especially because each string is of a different thickness, so you really have to kind of approach each string as a unique entity. What I found from doing that is that it opened up everything else. So everybody wants to get to the fast soloistic stuff. If you're a bass player, you have to realize that it is mostly a support instrument. There are times for bass players to take solos, but you have to be willing to be the majority of the time a support instrument. So you are supporting others as they solo. So you have to be solid on the time, you have to be solid on the harmony, good note choices, but it's really kind of a sacrificial instrument. The bass player has to be willing to not have a solo, unless you get to the point where, you're Ron Carter and you can take a solo on every song if you want, or Buster Williams, or some guys that I know that insist on taking a bass solo every and they can do that, but in the early stages and the middle stages of playing, there's not always a lot of opportunity, and a lot of bass players just want to play the fast stuff. But what I've realized is that all that stuff will be weaker if the quarter note pulse is weak, is not solid. So I literally spent years practicing just the quarter note, and I started to hear compliments from peers that I was working with. That were noticing that my time was sounding better, it was improving, and that was kind of a unique compliment, because usually in a jazz setting you don't often hear people acknowledge that you're getting better. They might acknowledge that you sound good, that you sound, let's say, oh, you sound great, it's so great to play with you, but very rarely will they say, oh, well, your time is improving, or what are you working on? That was kind of a unique thing. Oh, this is really working, so I kept working on it. But I spent years doing that in my master's study, and I like just getting together with drummers and playing that just time for hours. Another thing I want to mention about the right hand is that I'll kind of condense what I was going to say into just these next couple minutes. The right hand jazz pizzicato, which is what we use for the upright and electric. I'm going to speak mostly about the upright. You may have a bass player that's switching over from orchestral bass You know, sometimes you have to grab a bass player out of the orchestra, and they may not know how to play jazz pizzicato. Orchestral pizzicato is typically done with the tip of the finger. You know, it's lighter. Typically done a little bit higher on the fingerboard as opposed to down here. With jazz pizzicato, you want to use a lot more of the pad of the finger versus just only the tip of the finger. You want to use more of the pad, and various playing styles allow for different methods, but you can kind of hear the difference. You know, it's quite drastic, but it's because you're just using more of the finger. An important thing to note is that you don't want to use just the finger. You want to activate your wrist and create this type of a motion. This is what I recommend. And then you use your forearm and a little bit of your bicep to pull the fingers across the strings. So you're not, the strings are not going this way, they're going that way. Okay, that's another common thing, is that with orchestral pizzicato, a lot of times the strings will go more this way rather than this way. And so you can get a lot more volume because the strings are going this way rather than if they go this way, you get a slapping sound. You know, so if you don't want that, which not a lot of times you don't want that, you have to make the strings go sideways. So with every stroke, I'm bending my wrist, and the forearm and bicep are pulling the fingers. So the fingers are really kind of just moving this way. There's a little bit of motion, but it's really the bigger muscles that are doing the pulling. And that way, that'll save your fingers from getting too tired, and it'll also create a bigger sound. But I literally, you know, just practicing with the metronome. None of the in-between stuff. I leave all that out when I'm practicing quarter notes. So that's very important.
That makes me want to play.
You have to, the bass player has to exercise self-control to not put in those extra, you know, not put in all that extra stuff, the fun stuff that bass players like to do. And that does sound good if the quarter note is solid, but doesn't sound good and takes away from the time if the quarter note is not solid. So, left hand, just really briefly, like I said, good contact. The nice thing about if your bass player is transitioning over from orchestral is that the fingering system is the same. You don't have to change the fingering system. I recommend the Simandl method. A lot of bass players I see play this way. They play with their hand collapsed on the bass. It's very hard to play in tune that way. And it just usually sounds bad, and it creates an inconsistency across the board. But the fingering system is the same, which is nice. What was I going to say? I had something else I was going to say, I just lost it. Maybe I'll think of it later. Yeah? Well,
I have a question.
yeah.
So what are you listening for, and what are you looking for to lock in with the drummer?
I am looking primarily at the drummer's right hand, or left hand if they're a left-handed drummer. But ride cymbal is what I'm primarily looking at. If they're playing brushes, I'm watching the right hand as well, or watching the hi-hat, kind of back and forth between those two. But you know, as Jay mentioned, the ride cymbal and the bass and the feathered bass drum create the pulse. That's what I'm looking for. You know, I've had the good fortune to play with Jay a lot of times, and so it's easy to lock in with him. But I still, even with drummers that I'm very comfortable with, I still try to, you know, establish that eye contact with the ride cymbal, just as a safeguard, just to keep the time solid. A lot of times I can look around at the other players, but I try to establish that, especially if it's somebody I've never played with before. I try to establish that anyway. So that's what.
What are you listening for?
Well, the same things.
Okay.
But I start by looking. When I first moved to New York after high school, I always started playing with anybody by watching the ride cymbal. And then, I didn't want to just rely on my ears. I trained my ears to listen based on what I was seeing. But a lot of times what I found was that, and this, I think this is probably, I don't know if you may have some thoughts on this. Sometimes the sound that you hear is not, there's maybe a slight delay, and I've had that happen where I may feel like I'm pushing really hard time-wise, but the drummer is dragging a little bit, and it's because it sounds like it's later to him, and so that's why the eye contact is so important, because sometimes your ears can play tricks on you. So I would always try to establish that, and I would see drummers watching my right hand as well, and I would have conversations with drummers about how the time was feeling. How do you feel the time? Do you feel the time a little bit more on top? Do you feel it down the middle? Do you feel it a little on the backside? Having those discussions is really important.
Those are those conversations that can happen when the bass player and drummer just get together after school and just play for 20 minutes.
And listen to different drum and bass combinations and talk about, that's really cool how so-and-so plays a little bit more on top and so-and-so plays down the middle, and they lock in together, I just remembered the thing I was going to say, which is a problem that I've seen with bass players, particularly in high school and middle school settings. A lot of times I'll see bass players standing like this, playing like this, kind of more like a cello. This creates a lot of problems because you can't reach properly down into this good area for jazz pizzicato. They can sit and do that. I don't recommend sitting for playing jazz. And then the other way that you don't want them to be standing is this way, because if they're going to play with the bow, they can't play with the bow because it's going to hit their leg. And it's just also problematic because it causes your wrist to have to bend around more like this, and it's just the angles are all off. So I try to recommend that bass players play at more of an angle, kind of like the side of the abdomen, angling out this way. So.
I have a question about
Yes, sir.
approaching bass lines for young players.
Yeah.
Particularly when you're graduating from the charts that are, the bass lines are written out versus not. How do you approach teaching them that you teach them, give them all the chords and then have them write voice lead? I mean, what is your, how would you approach that with a 10th grader?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started playing jazz bass when I was about 12. And I have very vivid memories of sitting down with my dad, who was a clarinetist, and his friend, who was a guitarist, and we played trio. And we would read out of the real book. I was very, very new to jazz. We would read out of the real book, and I just started arpeggiating the chords. C7, I would just learn the notes of the arpeggio, and I wouldn't really go away from that too much. I would pretty much just play arpeggios. And then I started transcribing. That's the extra component that a lot of students don't have time or don't want to do. Well, I'm seeing a lot of directors having to do short transcriptions. I think that's really great. But that was really an essential part because learning the arpeggios is only one spot. You don't want to play a bass line just with arpeggios, but that is a good starting point. So I just got so much practice of just reading changes. Just looking ahead and seeing what the next chord was and just immediately thinking, G7, G, B, D, F, C sharp minor 7, C sharp E, G sharp B. Just hearing that in my head and applying it to my fingers, very often. That was a great foundation. So I would recommend, maybe having them practice that on a daily basis or weekly basis or something, where they're getting the practice of just reading changes. And then the transcription part is where you learn how to put it all together. You learn the scalar part of it. You can also learn the scalar part by also teaching them scales that are appropriate, such as the Mixolydian mode for dominant chords, Dorian mode for minor 7 chords, stuff like that. But the transcriptions, the baseline transcriptions, Paul Chambers, Ron Carter, Ray Brown, those guys, that's where you learn the language of the bass line. And it all puts together, and you hear that it's a mix of arpeggiated lines and scalar lines. So,
Can I say a couple things? Just, John Clayton has like 15 videos on YouTube that are absolutely amazing if you need, just to go watch. But one of the things, you talked about the left hand. I don't know if you've looked at your acoustic basses and how far off the strings, or how far off the fretboard the strings are. We spend a lot of money as band directors fixing instruments, and we never look at the acoustic bass setup. New strings, when was the last time they were changed? It's a huge thing.
yeah.
And those little 8th grade skinny boy, doesn't have a chance to get his left hand coordinated with the setup of 90% of school basses. So just something out there to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How often do you change the strings?
Ideally, it really depends on how often you play. Ideally, you want to change strings for the upright. I would say, for a professional, I think 6 months to a year, once every 6 months to a year. Again, it depends on how often you're playing it. For a school setting, I think every couple of years would be like a maximum. And you can also clean your strings. I don't know if any of you know this, but for upright bass, if you buy rubbing alcohol and get a cotton T-shirt and just kind of put the T-shirt over the bottle and tip it over, get like this much of rubbing alcohol on there, and then you loosen the strings a little bit, and you just go up and down the strings. You'll see green and brown and black and all this type of dirt coming off. That's good for the strings, and that'll actually help to kind of refresh the sound. So if you haven't tried that, that can be, if you don't have the budget for new strings, I recommend Diodario strings. They're typically about 120 per set, which is a lot cheaper.
Hybrid strings?
The hybrid, yeah, I like the hybrid. They're great for bowing and they're great for pizzicato. That's what I have on my bass right now, the hybrid ones. Yeah.
How are those different from, say, a bass you use just in a traditional symphonic orchestra?
How are those strings
The strings
different?
different, yeah. Are they different or?
Yeah, they are. The orchestral strings don't sound as good with the jazz pizzicato. You can tell the difference. They're a lot more, they're a bit more damp. They don't have as a long sustain. The jazz, if you get the pizzicato strings, they're going to sustain a lot, but they won't have a good response with the bow. That's why I like the hybrid, is that you can get the best of both worlds, especially if you do both and you don't have two basses. I only have this bass. I've had the same bass for 20 years. I keep the hybrid strings on there just so, they're not going to sound as good as orchestral strings, but Christian McBride uses them, so I feel like they're good enough for me.
What pickup and amp setup would you recommend?
I recommend the Realist pickup, which is made by David Gage. Ron Carter uses that. A lot of great bass players use that. It's about $200. It's a great investment. It sounds good on most amps and most live. You can easily buy, $1,000 pickup, and it might sound great, but for the value, I think that's a great way to go. In terms of amps, I really like the Gallien-Kruger combo amp, which is 150 watts. It's just a little, small guy. I think it's like a 10-inch speaker. Super light, good for a combo setting, and it works for big band too. I have currently a Gallien-Kruger. It's two 10-inch speakers, so it's a little bit bigger. but it's only about 25 pounds, so it's light. It's out in my car, I should have brought it in. It's good for louder settings, but it also works for quieter settings too. I've had really good success with the SWR Working Men's 12. I use that amp, for many, many years. I think Mark Bass is a good company. You have to take into consideration some of the EQing with bass amps, which each bass amp is different. It depends on your pickup, depends on the sound of the actual bass, where if the sound post is in the proper place, if the bass has a good sound on its own. There's so many issues. You want to be careful not to put too much bass in the EQ on the amp. You also want to be careful not to put too much treble in there as well. My GK amp that I use for most gigs, which is the bigger one, I typically have the bass turned down to about 9 o'clock, and I have the treble and the high mid-range up around 12 o'clock or a little bit higher, and it varies depending on the room. But the problem is that if you have too much of a bassy sound, it won't carry to the end of the room. The opposite is also not desirable. You don't want to have it to be too trebly or too mid-rangey. So you want to have enough bass in there that it sounds like a bass and it has a good presence, but you don't want it to be washing out, what's there.
I gotta say, as an adjudicator, listening to bands at festivals, a lot of times I hear bass is obviously cranked, the bass control way up and turned down the treble in the mid, and yeah, it's inaudible and it's incomprehensible. I'd say exactly what he's talking about. It's good.
Yeah, and again, it's really a case-by-case situation. This amp, which is working well for me, I've never played with this specific amp before. I've got the bass up a little bit higher, a little bit, maybe around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And then I've got the treble at around 9 o'clock. I just kind of go case by case. How can I get not too much of a bassy sound, but not too much treble, but enough high end that it'll cut through. So that's what I recommend. And the Realist, like I said, in comparison to a much more expensive pickup, is great. It's used by many professionals. Those strings I mentioned are, you could easily buy a $300 upright bass string set, and so they are great sounding strings, and the budget is reasonable. So that's the other hand.
If some strings are new and some old, is that going to be a big problem? I mean, like our bass, a string just broke. We have a recording session in a few weeks. Mm-hmm. Like, are we replace all the strings at once, or just with compromise that always exists in schools? Different things.
It's always best
right, Jay?
It's always best to replace all of them if you can.
Yeah.
If you have an old string laying around that you want to just use, I would recommend just cleaning it with rubbing alcohol. And seeing if that, if you want to listen for inconsistencies.
It's better than nothing.
Yeah. A lot of people haven't really heard about the rubbing alcohol solution for that. It works. Yeah. It's good for the strings too. It keeps the dirt fingers off.
If there's no other, yes.
So when you clean the strings, you worry about taking the rosin off the strings here, or do you want?
Yeah, and that's the other. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, because when you've got the rosin from the bow on there, which you need to get a good bow sound, the rosin. You want to have your bass player have some type of a cloth that they can wipe down the bass every time they play. This usually doesn't happen, but you want to, like a microfiber cloth or even a cotton t-shirt or something, just so you can wipe off the basic finger dirt and the rosin each time. And that means you have to reapply the rosin each time you play, but it's better for the strings, because if you get that rosin caked on the string like that, it can be really hard to clean. And in times when I have not always cleaned the bass after playing, trying to get caked off rosin is really a pain, and it's better to just clean it and start fresh every day. So, yeah. And that can also get your fingers when you're playing jazz pizzicato. If they're playing high, you can get that on your fingers and it'll make your fingers sticky and it won't, creates a lot of problems.
Ray, I think we needed 3 hours.
Yeah,
We'll turn some time over to Ron to talk about guitar.
Tell me if this sounds familiar. It's the first day of your jazz band rehearsal. Kid walks in wearing a Metallica shirt, coffin guitar case, pulls out a black BC Rich. Okay? I doubt you have very many kids that come in that are indoctrinated in jazz, that start off in jazz, and know what they're doing in jazz. Let me just tell you there's hope, because I was that kid. Okay? I walked into my first jazz band practice in the 9th grade, not a clue, never played jazz before in my life. I came from the folk, pop, rock, stuff that I enjoyed listening to, and my band teacher convinced me to try out for the jazz band, and actually it wasn't a tryout, I was the only guitar player that there was. So I got the gig. It was baptism by fire for me. But let me tell you, there's hope with a kid like that. Okay? And it may even surprise you. Don't just say, hey, we're good, send him back out the door. Give him that opportunity to really expand his musical vision and what he's going to see. So I'm going to be very brief. Well, I'm going to talk about the instrument that they bring in. Most of the time it will not be a jazz guitar. It will be like a solid body Les Paul, Stratocaster, some variation. I didn't even have the money to have one of those nice guitars. I had a knockoff Sears guitar at the time. And here's the first thing you want to know is that most guitars are capable of getting a jazz tone out of it. The key is there's this thing called a pickup selector. Okay, it might be down here, it might be up here, it's like the Les Paul, this is Strat or Telecaster Fender, they're usually down here. What you want to get your guitar player to do is play off of this back pickup. Okay, the one that's farthest from the bridge. Now most guitar players push this down, put it all the way down, and that's where it stays. Okay, that's where they live in their world. In the jazz world, if you want to start moving toward a jazz tone, get them to flip that switch up, come all the way up, and you'll engage this back pickup, which is definitely, as opposed to, which is the front pickup, okay? That's the first part of getting a jazz tone for a guitar player. And even no matter what guitar they have, if they have a pickup configuration that looks like this, you're in luck. Because that means it has a back pickup and there's a way to access it. So that's the first thing you want to do to help them with the instrument. Next thing is the amplifier. Hopefully your schools haven't bought like Marshall stacks and VHT amps, but that you go out and you buy an amp like the Roland Jazz Chorus here. It's just kind of the standard in jazz amps. It's really hard to break up, in other words, to distort. Okay, they're going to find out very quickly they can't do their metal head leads on it. It's just all going to be clean and a loud clean, which is what you want. Okay, you put those two together, you put that back pickup and a decent little amp, and you can get a good jazz tone. Okay, obviously it's a jazz guitar, but with whatever they happen to have. So that's, anybody have any questions or issues regarding the instrument and how to kind of navigate your guitar player toward those tones?
Ron, what did you say the brand on that amp was?
This is a Roland Jazz Chorus. Most solid state amps are going to stay cleaner, longer as far as when the volume comes up than like your tube amps. Tube amps are meant to kind of be pushed and to kind of overdrive quicker in the volume setting. And that's another thing you're probably going to have to deal with is your guitar players are used to being the king. the solo. All right, what they hear the most. Getting them to play at a nominal volume level will be the next challenge. Okay, and that's just got to go up to them and just be frank and just say, you're an ancillary part. A guitar is even ancillary to the rhythm section. You know, these three guys can go out and exist without me just fine, and play like that. So the guitar, you know, we're just kind of a color sort of instrument, and that's a great way to approach a guitar player and say, look, you know, you're there to add color. You're there to add a little bit of spice to the rhythm section, what's going on. It's getting them to just think differently about music. When I first joined the jazz band, I knew what a C chord was, F chord, all my basic open chords, all right? I even could play some bar chords, minor and major bar chords. Then I saw this thing called a C6, C minor 7th, F major 7th, G7 sharp 9. That was beyond my vocabulary, all right? No clue how to even approach that. And pretty much guitar players, if they came up through more of a folk thing, they live down here in open position, all right? If they're rock and rolls, they're just bar chords all over the place. So one of the things to work with them or have them work on is chord theory, okay? Understanding what the extensions are, because that's where a lot of guitar players, that's where I got tripped up. What's beyond a 7th? I knew what a 7th was. When we start talking 9s, 11s, 13s, and then major 9s, minor 9s, stuff like that, I didn't understand enough theory to be able to comprehend that and translate that to my instrument. So, and this may be something you even address, you know, in a rhythm section sectional with you keyboard players. A little bit of chord theory. Help them understand, and then tell them to go Google these chords. Take their chart, sit down with their internet, and type in these chords and find voicings for them. Okay? Even if they just learn one voicing for a minor 9 chord, they're going to sound so much better than just playing a straight C minor. It's going to have a jazz, you know, C minor versus a, you know, and they'll get excited. They'll start going, oh man, that is cool. I'm going to use that in my next Led Zeppelin tune. And don't allow them to bring pedals into the room. No pedals. Okay? They should just be able to play with their guitar and an amp. Once they get proficient and you have confidence in them and they want to bring in a delay pedal, okay. But let's not go crazy. Alright? The first thing I would do is take away the pedals. Leave that out of there. So we talked a little about chord theory, root position, and get them up on the neck. Okay, get them out of root position. And here's what was a revelation to me, is I don't always have to play the root in every chord. He's got that. You know, I can worry more about the upper notes, and I don't have to worry about root position of every chord. So now all of a sudden inversions open up. And that was a revelation to me, where I didn't have to make sure I included the root in all my voicings. Comping. Basically, when it comes to jazz, and this is where they start to work with a piano player a lot, is figuring out what type of comping, who's going to comp, when.
Basically, I think should be a major topic before we quit here, is how we're going to coordinate between the piano and the guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk a little about that. We've mentioned several times listening. Okay, this is where the guitar player and the piano player need to just really listen to each other and stay out of each other's way. And this is this thing that it's easy to say, harder to execute. Okay, and
let's demonstrate it.
What's that?
Let's demonstrate it when you're done talking. Let's have you two play too much and then play in an intelligent way.
Well, I think that's an easy answer. I mean, honestly, most of the bands that I've been in, if the guitar is comping, the piano does not. If the piano is comping, the guitar does not. And I know in a young band, in a junior high or high school band, that's kind of like, you know, torture for these kids just to sit there and do nothing. But most of the time, if they're playing together, they're probably not helping. The exceptions to that are if there's a specific figure in the band, that can be played by one, and the other can comp around that figure. Like, let's say if we were doing a bossa nova, and the guitar player is going chomp, 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 you know, just a typical Latin figure on a bossa nova. Okay, well, the piano player can play along that kind of, you know, open pad sound chords. Like, let's play Corcovado, you know what?
Oh, yeah. Now you're probably wondering,
Well, actually, so go ahead. You were talking. I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead. This is good, because guitar and piano really are, they go together.
Yeah, here, so I think that the exceptions, like I said, are if there's a figure, or if you're playing a bassy swing tune, okay? In a bassy swing tune, the guitar's role is to go jump, jump, jump.
Freddie Green, we call it.
And the piano player's role is to play bassy, okay? So I'm going to just play occasional popping chords here and there. That's what bassy did. If much more than that, and it gets to be congested and irritating.
The problem is we have two people that have the same role. See, we have different roles for the bass and drums, but the role of the piano and the guitar are both comping. We have two people with the same role, then it becomes competitive. And if they're both comping at the same time, it gets really ugly, very busy and cluttered. That's why Steve is talking about we need to have one comp at a time.
Yeah, so I think like Jay said for the drums, the piano and the guitar kind of have multiple roles. Sometimes you're playing hits with the band. And if that's the case, both piano and guitar can hit the hits. That's just fine. If we're talking about playing general time behind the band, we've got to be careful that it's not congested. And if we're talking about supporting a soloist, it should be probably one and not the other.
Let's demo the different flavors of comping on Corcovado, like you said.
All right.
We're ready. 1, 2.
So I'm not playing much at all. And honestly, if I were doing a recording like this, let's play it. I might play more like this.
2, 3, 4.
You know, just a little pad. So, yeah, honestly, less is more in that kind of situation.
And
We
the role
demo
would
that
be
Freddie
reversed.
Green. What's that? Should we demo that Freddie Green? Style?
Yeah, sure.
To demo the Freddie Green, though, you'd have to turn down a lot because Freddie Green didn't even use an amplifier.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, so there's nothing wrong with that playing. If you want to be historically accurate, you should know Freddie Green by the end was basically playing one or sometimes two notes. So, you know, literally, I mean, yeah, it's very, very minimal guitar.
Like 3 and 7, or 1, 3 and
And
7.
then show what you might do with that.
Yeah, okay, so what do you want to play?
In a mellow tone, A flat, first chorus, B flat 7. 2, a 1, 2.
Yeah.
Well, count basic play.
So, from a guitar player standpoint, the only other option is when the piano's, if the piano are comping and doing this kind of thing, I'm going to just add color here and there and try to stay out of the same frequency zone. All right? Maybe go a little higher in the inversion on my chord and just put a little stab, little color, but holding back is really hard for a guitar player. It just, you maybe say, all right, every 4 bars, I want you to play one chord on a syncopated note. mean, really restrain them. Okay, so they get used to this space that needs to exist. Then they can start getting the feel of how they need to integrate with the rest of the rhythm section, with what they do. Yeah, I was there. I was that kid. And these are some of the things I had to learn.
Can we hear an example of that, maybe, at reversing roles where he's kind of doing more of the comping and you're doing the...
Yeah, just same thing.
Same thing. 2, 1, 2, 3.
I think we need an example where you're both comping full bore. A non-example, we should say.
You want to see the bad?
Yeah.
I can play bad.
What's a non-example? That isn't the example. You're playing more just quarter notes. You need to play. You need to play syncopated, just like Steve.
Really bad. Really bad.
You're both comping.
That's so hard.
You're both acting as
do that.
it's against your nature, but you're both comping as a primary comper at the same time. There needs to be a primary and a secondary comper, as they've been talking about. But when you have kids, there's a lot of times it's 2 primary compers. There's what the problem is. Can you play like you're both primary compers?
And to make it worse, I will get busy. 1, 2, 3. Just hurts.
So really, another obstacle with 2 people comping is, I mean, so as a harmonic instrument, you have some play, some reign over your choice of chord, okay? And on a dominant chord, if the chart says F7, I'm probably not going to play strictly F7, okay? I'm going to be inclined to alter that chord somewhere, maybe. I have that option, okay?
When it says alter, he's talking about sharp 5, sharp 9, flat 9, this kind of thing.
Yeah, and so if I choose to play a flat 9 on F7 chord and he does not, then we're kind of in conflict immediately. And how do you know in advance if that's what's going to happen? So I mean, there's all sorts of challenges as soon as you have people playing a harmonic chord.
And your guitar player, if he sees an F7, she's going to play an F7. Going above that is not the instinct initially. Okay, to add those extensions. It's to stay with just the basic chord that's written. When it said minor 7, the thought never occurred to me I could maybe go with a minor 9 and still have the same kind of thing. All right, and that's just a whole, again, with chord theory and understanding where you can go with a dominant chord, with a minor chord, stuff like that. I guarantee you that'll be new ground for the majority of the guitar players you come across.
Just, where's a good starting point for the young players for chord theory? I mean, other than us, maybe, or like the app.
Minor 7s. I mean,
I mean, a resource, maybe. Like, you have a book or something that you suggest. I know we use like the iReal Pro for quick reference.
Yeah, there's actually an app that I have. It's got some great chord voicings. It's got tons of inversions in it. Let me find it real here. It's called Guitar Toolkit. It's got a tuner built into it, and then it's got all these kind of voicings. You can pick an instrument. It works on bass, ukulele, banjo. So yeah, guitar, and then it shows fingerings and all kinds of different inversions for these chords. So Guitar Toolkit is a great app for guitar players to use. Any other questions?
Okay, well, so I think similar to other instruments in the rhythm section, piano has a big challenge in simply interpreting the part. And actually, I mean, when you think about it, the piano part is the most intimidating part in the whole jazz band, maybe with the exception of the drums, you know. But you know, the drummer's being asked to do lots of things at once, and similarly, the piano player has big chords and lots of things, and it kind of gets overwhelming for a lot of piano players. What you need to know is a lot of jazz piano parts are written poorly, unfortunately. Okay, I've seen just a huge range of you know, published or handwritten charts over the years, and a lot of them are stuff I would just totally ignore personally. It's easier for me to do that because I've played jazz piano for lots of years, and I know what I really want to play. So kids in a junior high jazz band or a high school jazz band don't know what to ignore on their part. But a lot of times there's plenty they need to ignore. Like Ron was saying, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time the bass note is not something that a pianist in a jazz band needs to play. Now there are exceptions to that. If we're playing something funky or rock based, okay, yeah, you know, R&B style, then piano will dig into the bass line along with the bass, and maybe a guitar player too. But most of swing tunes, piano does not want to play the bass note on the chord, and so it might be written into their part. So they might need to figure out a way to play their part without hitting that bass note. Similarly, a lot of charts that I've seen, even modern published charts, have really bad sounding chords written into the piano part. And I suppose the possible reasoning behind that is that they're simple. Okay, I remember actually when I was in high school band, the chords that I played were simple chords. Like, you know, I played the blues like this. Okay, that's simple. It also sounds pretty darn bad. So anyway, I guess you kind of have to decide if you want your piano player to have success playing something, or if you want them to sound good. That's the choice you got. But so yeah, sometimes you need to look at the piano part and maybe give some recommendations. Like maybe if it's complicated stuff right now for the piano part, simplify it. Like X out some of the notes, maybe in the right hand. And kind of cut down the size of the job they have. Like, not that they shouldn't learn chords like this, but if the part has, you know, that kind of thing written into the piano part, we're talking about 6-note chords, they could function just as well with 4 of those notes, or 3, or 2. And having said that, let me say this, I think that the most educational, most enlightening moment of my whole jazz harmony career is when I went to a jazz camp, and it was 2 professors from IU, and you'll know their names, Dominic Sparrow and...
David Baker?
No, he was the piano player at the time.
Oh.
I want to say...
Bob Gustafson?
Bob... That's probably right.
Gustafson.
Bob Gustafson. Okay, so I went to a clinic. He told me that the way to build jazz piano chords was to start with the 3rd and the 7th of the chord in the left hand. And I gotta say, there's no more priceless piece of information for a jazz pianist, or for that matter, jazz arranger. Because as soon as you tackle the 3rd and the 7th of the chord, you have the essence of jazz harmony. Actually, I was teaching a lesson the other day, and I pointed out that Mozart and Beethoven have written this chord, okay? The root and the 3rd, the 7th and the 3rd, sorry. But when they used it, it went like this. Right? That's what classical harmony wants to do with the 3rd and the 7th. Jazz players do this. And that's the essence of the jazz sound right there in a nutshell, okay? So if I play a tune like do-do-do, like a jazz pianist just playing those 2 notes. I should also point out, I've heard many great jazz piano solos where they played those two notes in the left hand, or maybe even just one of those 2 notes. Like there's this one solo I transcribed in high school. It was a Bill Evans solo on Speak Low. and he plays big, it's a C sus chord, and he's playing. That's always playing on the left hand, is the third and the seventh of the chord through the solo. It's not to say that all jazz pianists did nothing but that, but that's a great start for sounding like a jazz piano player, is finding the third and the seventh on the chord. Once you've discovered that, you can build great sounding chords by just adding more notes in the right hand. Like the root and the fifth are excellent choices most of the time. I would say all the time, except sometimes, like you have a major seventh chord. You add the root and the fifth. You get a funny sounding interval that's not the greatest, but on all the other chords, the root and fifth is a great choice all the time. And the ninth and the 13th are excellent choices as well, and then you can start considering doubling notes that are already in the left hand. You can double the third. Some concern needs to be, you need to pay attention that it doesn't overpower the chord or create some weird sound that you don't want. But really, starting with the third and seventh is an excellent step to making great sounding jazz voicing.
Say something about the pedals, Steve.
Don't use the pedal. So I saw this band up in Idaho when I was adjudicating the festival up there, and saw this piano player, and I can't remember what tune he was playing, but it was some swing tune he was playing. I suppose the good part of it is that you could hear him play, which actually is unusual in a high school jazz band. Most pianists that I've seen play the piano part in a jazz tune is kind of like this. And they're inaudible, so why bother? But anyway, yeah, don't hold the pedal down, certainly, and there's not a lot of opportunities where a jazz pianist needs to use a lot of pedal. Maybe if it's a ballad tune, and but some sensitivity about blurring the harmony needs to be there. Yeah, I would just generally say get your foot off the pedal, unless you just absolutely have to use it.
How do you, this is a kind of different related question, but how do you teach the differences in comping style as we move from just the solid swing period, like Benny Goodman, Harry James, all that stuff, and then we move to the hard bop and the modal fusion stuff, and like, there's a big difference. So how do you like teach that kind of transition with piano?
Well, I think the difference is mostly about how syncopated and how aggressive the part needs to be. I mean, if I'm playing a Benny Goodman tune, or if I'm playing something in the big band era, well, I mean, maybe I should really, if we're playing, Glenn Miller style big band, I'm going to play totally different than if I'm playing, Basie or Duke Ellington tune from the 50s or whatever. Yeah, so there are certainly different styles. I would say this, when I was in high school, I guess I thought that the slashes meant play every beat, right? If you see slashes in a chord chart, that does not mean play each beat. What that means is this chord is occupying this space. But pianist is really doing us all a favor just to leave some space empty. I would recommend playing, let's say for a nice average, about once per chord. And maybe if a chord lasts a long time, then you can explore. And let me say this too. So sometimes when you're playing a swing tune, we think the beat is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But there's kind of a deeper pulse in a jazz tune that's more like every half beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's kind of more like where we want to hear some kind of harmonic pulse. So let's play All the Things You Are. Got a little slower than we did. So a lot of the tunes in this, or a lot of the chords in this tune last for a measure. So I could get away with just playing one chord per measure. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. played on the beat when the chord changed, and that's plenty of playing. Sometimes for variety, I like to sometimes play on the beat and sometimes syncopate. And I hope we don't need a definition of what syncopation means, but anyway, so let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. So right there, I was kind of trying to half the time play on the beat and the other half the time playing kind of in a syncopated spot. And that creates kind of nice interest. Now you're asking about more modern, kind of a
Well, I have a
hard bop.
I have a good pianist up there who is classically trained, but he's only been playing jazz for about a year and a half. And so he's in there and he has no clue on comping. And so I'm trying to, like, you know, play all these different stuff. So I'm trying to teach him as a trumpet player. And, you know, I know what's good, but teaching it is where you're coming very valuable right now.
What's cooler? What's cooler?
BYUI.
Don't you think listening is probably
Yeah, oh, definitely.
the answer?
to
There's a lot of things that don't need to be taught when they've heard it 100 times.
Yeah.
Oh, exactly. And that's what I'm focusing on. Language, listening, time, and that's...
Well, yeah. I think that the greatest thing that I did in high school was buy, you know, an album with Herbie Hancock, and an album with Chick Corea, an album with Oscar Peterson, and an album with the Levins, okay? And then the next greatest thing I did was transcribe them and learn how to play those tracks. That's so much, a huge part of my education as a pianist right there. Anyway, it looks like we're out of time. I don't know if we...
We are out of time, yeah.